Well, hello there, domain name people. Today, we're going to take a deeper dive into the world of managing domain name abuse with our resident expert and czar of managing domain name abuse for a variety of our clients, Mr. Steinar Grøtterød, who is based in Oslo, Norway. And we will delve into matters such as how can a registry or registrar reduce the amount of duplicative and non-actionable abuse reports, or at least how to deal with them, especially when presented at scale. And how do you get off a bad list or a blacklist? Why do European ccTLD registry operators, registrars, and resellers that are based there need to start paying attention to the NIS2 Directive? What's that? Well, that's the European Commission Directive on the Security of Network and Information Systems. And one big reason to pay attention is the proposed fine structure is very similar to the GDPR. That definitely, I think, gets some attention. And let's talk with Steinar over in Oslo, Norway, and get the conversation going. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the IQ video blog, and today is our 4th episode in the series that we hope to continue for a very long time. And today I have one of my colleagues that I don't often get to see, even on our normal calls that we have between us. We don't really do video that much, but I actually get to see you today. And that's my colleague Steinar Grøtterød, who is based in Oslo, Norway. Hello. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, Pinky. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Actually, yeah, it's amazing because we really don't actually get to see.
It has been a time since we actually met face to face. It's oh well, US and Norway is a long way, and
Yeah.
these days it's very hard to travel.
Yeah. It has been a really long time, and you've got a lot of experience in the abuse side. But maybe you can inform the viewers, how you got involved, in the domain name industry, to begin with.
Oh well, when I'm speaking about this, I feel like a dinosaur. It's been definitely a very, very long time. It started back in the mid-90s. At that time, I was employed by a semi-governmental body in Oslo, and I was partly responsible for introducing email and internet service to that organization. And well, I went to different conferences. At one of these conferences, I met Rolf Larsen, who is the chairman of the board of IQ.
Right.
During the dinner, because there's always a dinner after the conference and so on, we agreed that I should start working with him. So this was back in '95. And Rolf has started ISP, Internet Service Provider. So at that time we did everything, but we were and thanks to Rolf, I guess, we were very lucky and very clever in the sense that within a few years we become one of the largest ISPs in Norway, only beaten by the telco, because we were having a different approach than the telcos. So this was the beginning, and my job was to do domain registration for the clients and also IP address allocation for the leased lines. So Rolf went to another job, and in 2000 I joined him again with Active24. And Active24 is another success story in the sense of Rolf and domain names industry and so on. We became one of the 3rd, 4th biggest hosting registrars in Europe. We was the first ICANN accredited registrar from Norway.
I remember.
And at that time, I also start joining the ICANN meetings. So, and then it was my period with CORE, the Internet Council of Registrars, in the new ccTLD project, starting that in 2008. That was exciting time when discussing all the policy development for the new ccTLD program. We who have been in the business, this was not settled in a day. It took years. So, and then back with Rolf again in 2014 with .global. So I'm very happy. As I said, I feel like a little bit of dinosaur, but I'm also very proud to have taken part of the commercial internet industry in Norway. So it's good. It's good. It's been a long, interesting journey.
Yeah, I remember kind of a little geeky thing or domain nerdy thing. Is I remember using norid.no, I believe, as a source. It was a really great source for doing research for other ccTLDs.
Yeah.
Way back in the day. I remember bookmarking that. And that was, yeah, I'm going way back. I'm identifying myself as a dinosaur and all the years been in the business. So you got involved with .global and with Rolf, and I know, with the .global new GTLD, which has since been sold. But what experiences did you learn, from working with .global as it relates to, domain name abuse and compliance?
Well, first of all, I think I would like to say that the .global team, we were the good guys. We had never problems with ICANN compliance. We went by the book, so to speak. We didn't game or gamble with the things. And we didn't find it needed to be in the gray zone because our business model was kind of straight into a certain area that there was no point in gambling. But it was kind of an interesting story because, of course, we had meetings with ICANN compliance. I remember one meeting in Kobe. That was shortly after the registry audit report came out. And we had this meeting with ICANN compliance. And then I realized we had become an ICANN acronym. And I think that's a fantastic story, because during this conversation and this talk with ICANN compliance, they always refer to Rome. And I was wondering, because I'm pretty familiar with the ICANN acronym, but what is Rome? So I had to ask. And then they said, well, this is Registry Office Abuse Monitoring of a service that we know have rebranded to IQ Abuse Monitoring.
That's big time, yeah, when you become an acronym within the the community.
But again, it's like just recently, well, within the last 3-4 years, DNS abuse has become more of a topic and on the agenda for within the ICANN community.
Right.
So, well, we didn't have any problem with ICANN compliance. We had a very nice and good dialogue with ICANN compliance. I knew several of the officers and team members and so on. And it was an easy approach if you had some problems and some questions from ICANN compliance. Good times, good guys, good times.
Yeah, but as a I guess as a predecessor, well, that's good. It's good to be in compliance. It's good not to have any issues going down that road. And but on the abuse side, all the GTLDs, the new GTLDs are required to monitor their namespaces per ICANN Spec 11.3b. How did .global do that in the beginning?
In the beginning, we had a service from our escrow partner at that time, but they kind of they stopped the service. So we had two options: either to find another external service or build it by ourselves. And we agreed to build it by ourselves. So we developed our own service for abuse monitoring, primarily for the .global namespace. But we saw that this service was feasible and could be used for all TLDs and also registrars and so on. And this was mainly because we knew what we were doing. We had the experience of being an ISP, a registrar, a registry operator. We knew the ICANN ecosystem. We know what they were looking for, and we should have that in our system. So this was the beginning of the IQ abuse monitoring system service that we have today.
Yeah, and you know, in terms of the way abuse is handled, I mean, we know in ICANN Spec 11.3b that ICANN in the community have, you know, defined the types of abuse that shall be monitored and shall be reported on. How do you define abuse? I mean, is it any different from what's out there?
Well, it's that within the ICANN talks and the discussions, we talk about DNS abuse versus domain name abuse. In my opinion, I would more like to define domain name abuse to include more different categories than the strictly DNS abuse, which is more technical stuff. So domain name abuse is more into suspicious behavior connected to a domain name, not to an IP address as an example, but connected to a domain name. Mainly also something that you can solve by acting on the domain name's DNS resolving. So it's wider. I think that domain name abuse should include suspicious behavior connected to content, counterfeit products, maybe trademark issues as well, and fake pharmacy, fake news, all these kind of things that are definitely not in the ICANN definition of DNS abuse. So it is a wider scope of suspicious activity in the domain name abuse than in the DNS abuse.
But then going beyond what is defined in Spec 11.3b, you know, when I think what you're talking about is a little bit more intellectual property related, content related, which some argue, you know, is a little bit of a slippery slope. You know, if you're a registry or registrar, you know, should you be acting on that? You know, what are the legal ramifications because of the power of being able to do server hold, you know, or client hold? You know, that's a very strong action, you know, actually the strongest action that can be taken, correct?
That's correct. We very often talk about putting a nuclear bomb into solving a small problem. And yes, there are challenges here. But I think we have to have in mind that if we continue to have this endless discussion about defining DNS abuse, and there are stakeholders that want to have things to be included in that definition that ICANN cannot do because of the bylaws. ICANN has the responsibility for the security, stability, and the resiliency of the internet. Bringing content into that, they can't do that. So in my opinion, I think we should kind of let the definition and for DNS abuse be the way that I can define it and so on. But that doesn't stop the entities like the registry operators, the registrars, to include more things into their way of handling suspicious behavior. Content abuse, fake news, counterfeit products, etc. It doesn't stop them, but let's stop having this endless discussion about what is DNS abuse.
Right.
In my opinion, it's, well,
I think we can agree it's a combination of bad things and also things that some people think are bad, and other people think maybe not be bad, you know, somewhat subjective. But it does seem to me that at least being able to have a tool set so that to give a member of the community, whether that be a registry or a registrar, strictly speaking in the domain name space, or a reseller perhaps of a registrar, at least that they would have the tools and the knowledge and the resources available to them should they want to act on abuse or a particular type area that they want to concentrate on. I guess what I'm getting down to, and I've said this over and over again, you know, which is, you know, we all need to care about abuse. And yeah, a lot of people, you know, care about abuse, some more so than others, to be quite honest. But, you know, why should registry operators and registrars, care about abuse? Why is it important? What do you think about that?
First of all, I think they should care. Everybody should care, and not depending on any form of definition about what they should act on or not act on.
Yeah.
They should just act. That's as simple as that. If you see a crime, you should report it. That it is that easy. The challenge here is finding a good, doable way of reporting suspicious actions when you see them, the end users see them, and so on.
Yeah.
But you also need the toolbox. And what you're referring to, Pinky, is that having a definition doesn't help you to mitigate DNS abuse or DNS abuse. You need to have the tools to monitor your namespace or to see what is going on and act on what is going on. And that's the service that we are offering. And I think, well, you may put your finger into the air and saying that, well, I act when somebody calls me. But if you have a couple of million domain names and nobody calls, does that mean that your namespace is totally clean? I don't think so.
Yeah,
you need a toolbox and so on. And in addition to that, I think also you need to define your internal processes, how to deal with notices when you receive them, either from a system like we have or from external parties, from ICE and DAR. How do you process these things? This making some sort of a schema. How do you want to do these things? And I think the key thing here is that if you don't do anything, you might end up being one of the bad guys and turning a bad reputation into a good reputation. That's a long and winding road. It's very, very difficult. So it's important for your brand. It's important for your business. I think there was one Graham who at that time was chair of the registrar stakeholder group. He said that abuse will never pay. It will never pay. You will always lose money on your abuse. So the thing is that mitigate it and get it as small as possible. Have your internal routine, have the toolbox ready, and be willing to offer something, some resources to handle this.
How can a registry operator or registrar avoid the problem of duplicative abuse reports and just getting a lot of non-actionable stuff coming down their pipes?
And that's a very good question, Pinky. And since we have the experience of being a registrar and also a registry operator, we knew that we had to limit the number of notices sent to the registrars as a registry operator, because we don't want to fill the abuse basket for the registrar in unnecessary emails. So one of the philosophies we kind of implemented very, very early in our roadmap for the abuse manager is that when we receive a notification for one domain name from several blacklist providers, we put that into one case, not multiple case, and we compress that and inform send that information back to the registrar as an example. This is positive in two ways. But first of all, it reduced the number of emails from our system to the clients, to the registrars as an example. And secondly, also it gives some sort of an indication of this is something really bad going on, because maybe you have a report of phishing, malware, and spam connected to the same domain name. And that's kind of a red flag saying, hey, something really dirty is going on. In addition to this, we also keep historical records. So meaning that the abuse agent using our system do have a record of what have we done with this, has been connected to this domain name previously. And that's also another indicator about maybe doing something good. We also have tools saying that if it's a newly registered domain name, well, why is a newly registered domain name automatically, in bracket, being reported? this is something that's I describe as there's a pattern. You have to investigate the pattern, and then you maybe can be more proactive in abuse mitigation.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like basically being have a proactive or a reactive, strategy. And one of the things that I say is that, if you're a registry operator or a registrar, the last thing you want to have happen, if you care, is to be on a bad list somewhere with a reputation.
Exactly.
Provider, blacklist, or service. And it's kind of like being on the front page, even if you're, somewhat, you're trying to do something. But the thing about that is that you may think you're not bad, but other people might think that you're quote unquote bad. And it's sort of like being, it's like being on the front page of the newspaper and someone saying, Steinar was found not guilty, of robbing that bank. And it's sort of people going, well, even though it says not guilty, it's sort of like, well, he must be maybe associated with something bad by virtue of the fact that he's on the front page of this. And so that's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's not the perfect analogy, but it's kind of the way I see it for at least, some TLDs is, you don't really want that reputation. You don't need it. You don't want it. And ultimately, it's not going to be good for you. And, that again, it comes to having that proactive approach, but it takes more than being just proactive. It does take the tools, it does take the resources, and how one develops a policy. What are we going to, are we going to prioritize phishing and malware over this, or are we going to prioritize spam? What is it that we want to prioritize, and then what is the policy? And then the other thing is, quite frankly, I think a number of operators are not going to really want to move on, do anything if they feel that they're getting a lot of false positives, or that they feel, well, actually, they won't act unless they have evidence, right? And it's really not a good thing, if you act on a site and perhaps a site on a domain name, but the related site goes down, and then you find out that, oh wow, that shouldn't have happened. We just took down somebody that has 100,000 unique visits per day or something like that, and it's
and it's and I agree with you, Pinky. It's the nuclear scenario here. And this is very. This is a tough discussion. I wear several hats. I also wear an ISOC hat, and I've been pretty much monitoring what is going on the at-large side of the ICANN community. Yeah. And there's quite an understanding that the blocklist providers, they are not trustworthy. And I think that's the tool we have today, the blocklist from the reputation block providers.
Right.
On the flip side here is that they should actually be more active to give more evidence in the notices they're giving to their subscribers, clients, etc. Mm-hmm. Because it will harm very much, and will harm the abuse mitigation very much if we don't have the best tool for identifying suspicious behavior.
Right.
So my point in saying this is that I really hope that the blocklist providers, I won't refer to names because this is going to fall back at any time, but they should be more active in the dialogue and take part in the discussion and describe what they're doing. How come is that one blacklist provider identified the same domain name connected to phishing and malware, but the other one is not identifying both of them? We have to understand this. It doesn't make sense to be stopped by a police and two officers saying that you drove too fast, and the other saying, no, you didn't. We have to trust on this one.
Yeah, so, I agree with you. I think at least in the years now that I've been dealing with abuse on behalf of our customers, And I find that, with the domain name system, we have a lot of things that are defined, within the ICANN community. We have EPP. It's very, everybody has their own little way, and maybe they might do things in terms of their procedures, but there is a system. We know, when a domain name is created, we know what the life cycle is. We know how that works. We all agree on it, and it's understood. It's documented. But when it comes to abuse and reporting of abuse, there really isn't any kind of a standard out there. I'm not aware of any organization that sort of agrees on a set of standards. And I don't, maybe it's because of the nature of abuse that it's evolving and the threats are evolving and that sort of thing. But I think the nature of gathering evidence hasn't really changed, maybe. I could be wrong. I mean, we do have the ability, digitally to scrape things and look for things and all that. But, again, at a registry and a registrar level, I feel that, it's a resource. It can be a resource issue. It's a cost center. It's like, wow, this actually doesn't earn us revenue. And, we're concentrating more on selling these products, that earn us recurring revenue versus, dealing with abuse. So I guess, when you have the resources available, you might commit to it, but over time, you're probably going, oh my gosh, unless I have some sort of clear set of circumstances or standards to work with, I'm not really sure I have enough time to devote to all this. I'm kind of rambling on here, but I think you get what I'm.
No, and I think this is very challenging, Pinky. And today we have kind of a phrase or kind of something trustworthy notifier. What's the name of the
Trusted notifier? Trusted
notifier. And so it's just like, what is a trusted notifier? What's the definition of becoming a trusted notifier? When we did the exercise investing different block lists for our services in the early days, I think we were into over 200 different block lists.
That's right.
So, some of these is claimed to be trusted, but they were not. There's no standard, and as far as I see. So maybe openness, transparency, in this industry, not a black box that you're saying that, well, a domain name comes into the box, get out as a phishing attack. We have to have more evidence. We have to understand how a phishing is being identified. Phishing may be a better example than malware hacked or whatever. But we have to have the understanding. The community have to trust on these things, or we're in problem.
This is something, I go back, to the early days of .com, when we had less than 10 million domain names. And I remember we were predicting there'd be 100 million, and people thought, we were, what were you drinking today? But, with all that came the spam with the growth. And I'm not trying to just, throw .com under the bus or anything here. That's not my intent. What I'm saying is there was no, regulation from ICANN that basically said that anyone has to do anything about abuse. I don't think it's until the advent of the new ccTLDs where abuse was actually addressed in a contractual form, with the contracted parties.
That's correct, Pinky. And also when you look into the ccTLD world, there are very few ccTLDs that actually have these kind of contractual regulations into their registry agreement with the registrars.
Right.
And as an example, when I discuss with some ccTLDs about how do you act on DNS abuse, well, we don't have any regulations to act on the DNS abuse. We have regulation for alternative dispute resolution regarding trademark, intellectual property rights, etc., coming into DNS abuse. No, we don't. And I'm not saying they don't care, but it doesn't have the toolbox. Very often not given by them, given to them by their governmental bodies. ccTLDs are very often connected to local jurisdictions. And this is a problem. This is a problem because, well, when you don't have any form of regulation from your for a registry, how should you kind of depend, how should the registrars act on them if you're dealing with that TLD? For the legacy TLDs also, it's the same. They don't have Spec 11 3B. They will be quite a long journey for ICANN, and they want to have one registry, base registry agreement for all generic TLDs, but it will be a very, very long journey for having the old brackets G's into that agreement.
That is an area that, if you think about it, the ccTLDs in terms of market share, in terms of the total amount of domains registered, is far more than the new gTLDs. And again, I'm not trying to throw new gTLDs under the bus or anything at all, but I know there's been a lot of concentration on that area in terms of abuse because it's the only area that contractually has to deal with it. But the ccTLDs, you know, there's a lot out there. And just from what I've seen, you know, there's abuse on domains that have been registered, you know, 15 or 20 years ago.
Great.
And folks aren't even aware of that. When we run scans, you know, we find it. I'm not saying that there's tons of abuse at that age, but I'm just trying to illustrate the fact that, yeah, there is abuse. And, you know, ccTLDs can run low price deals. They can do what they want, again, subject to their local rules and regulations. That is an area that probably is a little bit overlooked. And
I agree with you, Pinky, and just the pure fact that like content abuse has to be solved on the local jurisdictions. The ccTLDs has a better way of regulate and for mitigation of content abuse than the gTLDs, because there are no laws that are equal all over the world. So they should look what they have and try to do that. Well, there is a tendency now. There are more ccTLDs getting involved within the ICANN discussion about DNS abuse.
yeah,
There are definitely, they have to, now let me rephrase that. Due to what is going on in Europe when it comes to computer crime and what is called the NIS Directive, I have to look it up because this is one of these ugly acronyms. This is a directive on security of networks and information systems,
yeah,
also known as NIS2. When this comes in being in operation, it will take some time. The ccTLDs in registry operators in Europe and the registrars and the resellers will have to develop a way to mitigate abuse. And then I'm not talking about DNS abuse, I'm talking about content, I'm talking about fake news, intellectual property breaches, and so on. And there will be similar fines than the as the GDPR, which is huge.
yeah.
So this is something that this will be an eye opener for many entities. Also, CCT registry operators, they have to do something, and they have to start doing it now.
And when is that to be in effect?
Well, it's in the very early days. As of today, there is a draft been issued from the European Commission, which is out for public comments. So based on the public comments, there will be legislation proposed. Then it will be approved by the Commission, and then it has to be ratified by the different European countries. So we're talking 3, 4, 5 years. But yeah, that's the area, that's the process, timeline here.
Well, I remember when GDPR was first mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, what's that?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you know, look look at what has happened as a result of that. No further comments needed. So it sounds like that that's something to be aware of. And how can someone avail of your services to help them? And what I mean by that is the consulting services that we provide at IQ.
We're trying to advise them in developing a toolbox that is feasible for what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
That includes a system that could monitor the namespace. That include policies reflecting terms and conditions, how to act on when you receive different suspicious activities and so on. And very often it's like they need some sort of a skeleton to go to the governmental bodies and saying that per today, we don't have the legislation to execute this, but this is what we actually want to have because this is needed. So it's like the early draft of legislation that maybe is needed for the ccTLDs in particular, for the registrars and so on. I very often said, you have to look into your terms and conditions. If you discover something really bad going on within your namespace, but you don't have the right to act on this, you will be the one that will get the shit. But there is no way. You need to define these tools, internal routine, processes, identifying, as you said, what is most important or what's it more critical to solve immediately than malware, hacking, phishing, etc. All these kind of parameters, making it easy for any officer to, well, I get this, I know exactly what to do. Escalation path and so on. It's no rocket science. It's willingness.
Yeah, it's taking the first step and understanding what's available, and I think sometimes folks just sort of throw up their hands, and
Yeah.
Well, we have an abuse page. We do collect that. It goes into some spreadsheet, or perhaps it goes into some internal ticketing system. But when it starts scaling up, and that's when somebody that normally does customer service or some other function starts going, well, wait a minute, this is taking up, half my day. I need to be actually concentrating on these other things that can help us generate revenue. We need to do something about this. Every time I talk to you, I learn. And today, I always learn something a little bit more, about abuse, that it continues to fascinate me, and also educate me on the importance, again, as we were talking earlier on about caring about abuse. Why should you care about abuse? And so if you really do care and you want to do more, or you don't really understand how you can move forward, you should talk to Steinar, right?
Yeah, and I'm available, not 24/7. I need some sleep as well, but anyway, there's ways to reach me, and I think it's just identifying that you have a problem, and you should then look into us and say, well, we have the experience of giving one example. A client of us, Registry Operator, was struggled with being on the top 10 of a blacklist for bad guys, and we went into contract with this client, and within a couple of months we are away from that blacklist. We're not on the top 10. I don't know exactly. Maybe it's 20 or 40, but it's not the front page, and that's so important. And during the process here is that we assist and we discuss with the clients what sort of process do you want to have? Like, do you want to give one notice to the registrar? Do you want to give 2 notices? And what sort of categories should we immediately request, like a server hall? All these kind of things, and it makes the clients thinking. It's not. I want to get off the list, But yes, we will get you off the list, but we have to agree how we should operate this, because it has to be trustworthy, it has to be professional. And that's what we're trying to achieve with managed abuse. A professional service to get rid of, getting you to still become one of the good guys, not the bad guys.
Right. And I think, hopefully everyone, that's in the community wants to be one of those good people, out there, good stewards of their registry operation or their registrar operation. Steinar, thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Pinky. It's been a pleasure. Stay safe.
Thanks again to Steinar for sharing his wealth of knowledge. I learn so much from him every time we talk, and you can too. Please write to us and we're happy to discuss how we can help. And we also encourage your feedback on any domain name industry topic that you'd like us to explore in future segments. Please join us for our next segment, where I'll be speaking with Carol Bitter, who is the Chief Data Scientist at Spamhaus. Until then, thank you for watching.